of San Francisco.
Sorry.
No problem. I started practicing Aikido in 1974 at Aikido of San Francisco because of the dearth of uh, advanced practitioners at the time. I was able to shoehorn my way into teaching beginner classes starting in 1975, and I taught more or less continuously for some decades after that. I started mediation in 1979. We introduced the concept of applying mediation to the resolution of complex civil litigation, and that's been my dharma since then.
So do you still train on the mat?
I do not. And I let go of my teaching quite some time ago when it became apparent that my traveling schedule for my work was not allowing me to give my students the consistency that they deserved in my teaching.
Sure.
So these days, my mediation practice is my mat.
You told me prior to this interview that your career was in litigation, and there came a point where you found that a little bit difficult to stomach. So can you tell me why that was the case?
Well, I started practicing law um, in 1974, and I, at the time, was a little bit in terms of the spectrum. I was kind of fairly far along in terms of aggressiveness and hyper rationality. And the practice of litigation was just bringing that out more and more. So there came a time after I was about 5 years in where I thought I should pause and reflect before the remainder of my life had passed by, and I'd never really found something that resonated with who I had begun to grow to be. And so at that point, I took a sabbatical, went to train in Shingu, and when I came back, I just had the revelation that it was time for a more major change. I stumbled into mediation work. I can't ever claim that I would have found it myself, but there was a woman named Barbara Phillips who had conceived the idea of modifying mediation as it existed then, which was primarily in neighborhood disputes, organized management, labor, some family law, and modifying it so it was suitable for being applied in a single day format to start unraveling complex legal disputes.
So do you think that your what you had practiced and were learning on the mat helped you sort of come to this point where you thought there's incongruency here, or was it just something else?
I certainly didn't see any nexus at that time between what I'd been studying and practicing on the mat and the work we were plunging into in mediation. That's something that kind of revealed itself over time.
Okay.
Um, in terms of the who I had become by then, yeah, I think Aikido was a major factor in that. Again, I wasn't terribly self-reflective at the time, so I'm not sure I saw the line between those points, but it was definitely there.
Okay. So you fell into mediation. I'm guessing that after a point, it kind of felt like home. Um, or what would you like? How would you describe it?
Um, it was so, let me step back half a step. Um, Mediation was not widely known and certainly not applied in any form in the context in which we were trying to do it. So it was so overwhelmingly challenging to try to get traction within the legal community that to say it felt like home would be, yeah, if home was running around frantically, flying across the country and trying to demonstrate something that people had no reason to have confidence in. It had no track record. So it was a kind of a dysfunctional home at the time. So it took a while before it started to feel um, that there was something in it, the way we were doing it, that was congruent with what I had been doing on the mat.
You must have had some success even in those early days, and maybe the hit rate was not as big as it is now, but it must have been working for you to gain any traction at all.
Perfectly reasonable supposition. And indeed, it was working in terms of the hit rate defined as whether cases were settling. Actually, right from the get-go, it worked. And I think that was more a function of how incredibly dysfunctional our legal system in the US was as a system for actually resolving disputes, reaching agreements on settlement. I hope we'll have a chance to get into that distinction in a little bit because I don't mean to be accusing the whole system of being dysfunctional. But in terms of allowing people to negotiate agreements, it was absolutely dysfunctional. And so when we simply applied an alternative, a less dysfunctional system, things just started resolving. We got better at it, and I certainly got better at understanding why that was so. But no, right from the get-go, from our very first mediation, cases were settling. And ironically, that's kind of what helped us launch because lawyers left and their clients left uh, so astonished that cases that they had been litigating sometimes for years and trying unsuccessfully to negotiate the resolution of sometimes for quite a long time in a single day were getting resolved. And that gave us some panache. You know, people thought, oh, I don't know what this is, but it must be magical because it's happening. In other words, we inadvertently were introducing them to the magic that we've all experienced on the mat when you enter in with ki into a state of I.
Do you want to add a little more to that, or
No.
okay, good. Okay, so some just number questions. I think you said when you started mediation, but how many years has it been now since you've been doing this?
Well, I started in 79, so if my math is not failing me, I'm in year 47 now of
Yeah,
doing this. And it's been doing this continuously since then.
and still actively practicing.
Yeah, the same kind of caseload. I do aspire to be traveling less, so I'm a little bit more picky in terms of what we sign on to do. But yeah,
So over the years, how many clients or resolu mediations do you think you've been through?
I literally stopped counting when I hit 4,000. And that was some time ago because I was beginning to feel childish for keeping count at that point.
And it's a leading question, but how many of those mediations ended up with a successful result? If you were trying to put it in percentage terms, what would you say your hit rate is?
While I was keeping count, it was literally 80 to 90% fluctuating to some degree according to, I don't know, phases of the moon or other factors that I couldn't really identify. But year after year, 80 to 90% resolving, and the vast majority in a single day of mediation. Um, Over the course of time, um, the kind of cases that come to me, the ones where people are willing to travel sometimes halfway around the globe to spend a day together, invest in the cost of the process, bring the kind of level of people with their busy schedules together for a day. The complexity and the challenge of the cases has grown. Some of the cases I work on, people walk in the door not only billions apart, but tens of millions, hundreds of millions, and not infrequently billions of dollars apart. And that has reflected in turn, I would now say realistically, it's more like 70 to 80 rather than 80 to 90% that exit the process with a settlement agreement. And even among the ones that are resolving more frequently now than it used to be the case, I will do some follow-up, some hot pursuit after the day of mediation, usually not entailing another day of mediation, usually just entailing some telephone follow-up. But the resolution rate has still been within that range.
So do you deal entirely in the sort of commercial environment, or have you done mediation in other spheres?
I would say that the majority are what we would call commercial, that is involving large corporate parties, at least on one side. But the range of cases has been um, pretty much everything people could imagine getting into a fight about that ended up either threatening to or getting them into litigation. And it's not just been within the US. That my practice is primarily within the continental US, but has included Europe and Asia and South America. Um, the type of case, I guess the main defining characteristic is whether it seemed worth it to the parties to go through the time and trouble of working with me. Um,
Yeah.
it's usually an investment, not only in my fee, but in hauling themselves to different locations. So it could be a case that involves a dispute over movie rights to something. So I would usually think of that as a commercial dispute, or it could be two large corporations who have some global litigation going over patent rights. It's a pretty broad spectrum. And within that spectrum, I'm delighted to report that the process, the mediation process, seems agnostic in terms of results, no matter how legally or factually complex the disputes are, no matter what type of dispute. It even seems agnostic in terms of the kind of factors that one would reasonably assume should make a difference, language issues, cultural issues. Um, and I hope we'll get into at least my thoughts about why that is, but basically it comes down to the same reason that aikido is agnostic, the same reason that we have folks who are participating with us today from around the globe, because it's based on physics at the end of the day.
Oh. So I take it from this that the process, no matter who you're dealing with, is essentially the same.
Absolutely accurate. We start off, parties will brief in advance. And lawyers being lawyers, sometimes it's an oxymoronic term. I'll get a stack of stuff that could be measured in inches, in feet, occasionally
Ah,
to no joy in yards of material. My job, as I conceive it, is to fully assimilate all of that to the degree that I can sit down with people who've been working on it and with it for years and point out to them inconsistencies and weak points in their logic and their arguments or their analyses. That's really an integral part of the process. But it occurs before the day of mediation. On the day of mediation, everybody gathers together. These days, occasionally people are appearing virtually. Occasionally, the whole thing is being done on Zoom as we are talking today.
does that make a
Um,
difference? I
you
mean,
know, again, I don't want to digress right now, but in terms of the only objective metric, which is whether cases are settling or not, no. And frankly, that's been a matter of astonishment to me. But again, I will refrain from digressing too far in that direction right now. So people get together in a joint session. It allows the representatives of the parties to make a brief presentation of how they see their position, why they think they're right. I'll then summarize the positions back uh, immediately after each presentation to make sure that I've got it, but also to demonstrate that I have in fact put in the time in advance to be able to wrap my brain around what the issues are to the degree that I can take an hour-long presentation, which occasionally they will extend to, and summarize it cogently back in a matter of minutes without missing any of the salient issues. And then we proceed into caucus. And in the caucus, it's basically designed to do three things: give people a chance to share other information that they think might be useful, but that they don't want to be sharing across the table, to hear, in effect, devil's advocacy, to hear from a neutral party how things may appear a bit differently to a judge or a juror or an appellate judge if they do not find a negotiated resolution. So it gives them more perspective on what their risk profile is if they proceed through to the bitter end in court. And finally, we can begin to consider what the options are realistically for getting a negotiated resolution without people fearing that they're bidding against themselves by having that discussion right across the table. That's the caucusing process, and that's the remainder of the mediation process, in the sense that the parties usually do not come back together across the table. After that initial joint session, I simply go back and forth between the parties, not carrying offers and demands back and forth. So in other words, it's not a facilitated negotiation in that sense, but rather gaining more perspective between each of the parties and myself, to the degree where we can be touching fingertips on what the deal points would have to be for a negotiated resolution. And then I'll usually crystallize that process by putting a proposal on the table myself as mediator, allowing both sides, or all three sides, or all 10 sides, depending on how many parties are involved, to say yes or no in a safe context where they know that unless everybody's agreed, that I won't disclose that anyone has agreed. And that's usually the culmination of the process.
So just to be clear, in caucus, because not everybody will know that jargon, I didn't until I talked to you. That means you basically you take one party aside and it's just them in private that you're talking to, and then you're doing the same with the other side as well, yes?
Yes, and to make it even more concrete, let's say we're back in the day now, and I have an office in San Francisco, which I let go during the course of the pandemic. We'd have people all start in our largest conference room. Then they would disperse to their separate rooms, and for the remainder of the day, I'd be getting in my steps, kind of jogging back and forth among the different rooms. So yeah, literally, whether it is a virtual caucus room, if we're meeting by Zoom, or we're meeting in some law firm's offices in some city or around the globe, I will be in motion between the parties for the duration of the process. And the caucusing part is the terminology we use to refer to those separate sessions where I'm in the room with a given party and we're having frank discussions about legal issues or factual issues or options for settlement.
Tony, it may not be all that distinct, but I'm interested to know, especially around the analysis work, I can really get how the Aikido would make a difference both in your own presence and in your ability to read the room, read the field of the dynamics when you're engaged. But in what way might Aikido have positioned you or prepared you for this incredible analytic pass you have to make to take in the complexity before you step into the crucible?
Because that was a brilliantly insightful question, because they seem to be not as, it would not appear to me that there was an overlap between the physics that I perceive to be at play in Aikido and in the mediation itself, and that process of assimilating reams of information within a brief amount of time. I can tell you my speculation on that, but I'm not as confident that I'm not projecting thoughts onto it, and it's just happening for some other reason. But here's my speculation. Just as it's true that there is a field of ki that we hopefully open up into on the mat, and that flows through and to some degree informs our aikido practice. The same, I believe, is true in terms of there's a field of energy and information all around us. It preceded the internet to some extent. We're laboriously trying to recreate something that was already there. But we humans, over the course of evolution, in order to survive, had to learn to screen out information. You can't be passing on your genes if you're padding through the forest and you're open to all of the information that's in there because you have to be attuned to that sound of a twig snapping under the face of under the foot of a leopard if you're going to pass on your genes. So I think that we humans have ironically evolved a really profound ability to screen out information that is all around us. So to some extent, the same kind of process of letting go as you enter into an interaction with people in what we would call Aikido technique and Aikido practice, I've learned to do with the data that I receive. So to some extent, it's like scanning it all into a computer and both the off-the-shelf human brain's ability to rapidly assimilate data and scan for consistencies and inconsistencies. When you approach it not from the sense that I was used to studying data, but letting it flow in and you just open up to it, it becomes manifest where the critical issues are. Again, to a degree where I can be sitting in a room with really astute, accomplished people and point out to them critical correlations and inconsistencies in the information they submitted to me that they
Oh,
had not seen because on my side, I was approaching it, I don't flatter myself, with a little bit of experience of opening up in terms of I. And on their side, they were burdened heavily by the reactivity that is inherent in any kind of a fight to the degree they weren't seeing things that were right in front of them. And on my side, I was able to see things that were hidden within reams of documents.
being
That should sound a little bit mysterious, and I
uh,
will admit I'm captivated by that process because I do not flatter myself. It's not that somehow I've gotten so good at scanning information. I've simply had the benefit of having to do it thousands of times
Sure.
to a degree that I've just had to abandon my usual approach for reading and assimilating information and let it kind of flow into and through me.
just a note,
Was that responsive at all, Chris?
absolutely, and I think deadly accurate. But it's exactly what we're utilizing. I'll call it Aiki dialogue, somatic dialogue, as a way of enabling leadership teams to sense the field of play, the forces at work, the opportunities, the open opportunities. It's exactly what I think Aikido can make a huge difference in. And I won't go into it. It's your play, but it absolutely rings with what these senior leaders are discovering within themselves when they sink open to receive the dynamics of a field that are not visible otherwise.
I love hearing that because it reinforces what I really believe and really hope is true, which is that what we are all practicing, all of us within the Aiki community, um, is a form of physics. And the reason I find that hopeful is if it were simply that we had learned somehow to master some esoteric techniques, well, that's, we're going to pass away. I hope to be around for a while, but, and that would be passing away with us. But if what we're doing is furthering the exploration that O-sensei began into something that is fundamental physics, well, physics will persist. And physics is agnostic and unlimited in its reach. And that gives me hope, which I have to say these days, when I look out on the world, I don't find a lot of reason to hope. But I will put my faith in physics.
I'm going to just say that I think probably being a lawyer helped you because you're used to that idea of taking on board an awful lot of information and sifting it. And then I'm going to bring it back to the mat and say, when you look at Toei Sensei's work, he had five principles for.
Before you do, I'm going to challenge that perfectly reasonable assumption. These days, to be perfectly honest, the fact that I have been a lawyer for a long time, I'm sure the clients find reassuring, and I'm sure it makes it easier for lawyers to accept the perspective I'm bringing to bear and the risk profile I'm giving them. They have some reason to put confidence in. But frankly, I don't think the study of law or the practice of law really teaches toward assimilating information in a balanced way.
No, and I didn't mean that. I
No,
just
no,
don't
no,
think
no,
that you were
no,
fake.
I think you did, but for the lay people, that we might be speaking to, I did want to make the related points that I do not consider having a law degree or having practiced law to be somehow integral to doing the work of a mediator, even in the context in which I work, which is fraught with
Sure.
legal ramifications. Please go ahead.
I just meant that you wouldn't be fazed by seeing boxes of papers because kind of you were used to that kind of thing. But bringing it back to Aikido, when you step on and you're doing randori, say, you have to be aware of all the moving parts and you have to know what to focus on. Number one, you
Well,
can't, yeah, and that's where you're open to this field and you move to the first problem, and then it's the second one, and you have to be right on that, otherwise you get got.
Well, again, you humble me now in terms of my skills as an Aikido practitioner. Um, in Randori, whenever I tried to figure out what to do first and what to do next, and I was on my butt pretty quickly. The only way Randori ever really manifested for me was when it all went away. In fact, I vividly remember my third degree black belt test where the instructor panel decided to have a bit of fun with me, and they sent in three of the killer people there
Ah,
and clapped, and the next thing I knew, they had clapped again, and everybody but me was tossed in the edge of the mat. And to this day, I so wish I had a videotape of that because I have not a clue what happened in between. I don't mean to suggest that in mediation, I'm not continuously kind of running a track in my mind of what issues, are really need to be addressed in what kind of a sequence. But that's not where my attention is.
Sure.
My
Well, I think
attention,
you've hit on a point. On the mat, you can't figure anything out. You haven't got time to have that mindset. You've just got to be in the moment and know where, not know, but just be in the right place. And
yes,
I think that's what you're actually doing in your mediation. You're just being, and you're seeing
yeah,
it for what it really is.
yes, and um, what I found more and more delightful is experiencing what happens when I am just being with someone. Let's say I've walked in the door of the caucus room and I know that there's a particular issue that is really paramount to the moment. It's fairly complex, and I walk in the door with some my frontal brain generating thoughts about what I should say. But on a good day, when I can muster the courage to be vulnerable to the degree that I can walk in and simply be there, not as this pro mediator who's now directing what the next act in this play is going to be, but walking in and just being there with people. It's a paradox because clearly I can't just walk in and say, oh, well, I could. But people would, I think, pretty swiftly be out the door. So I walk in and my frontal brain is doing what it does, and I can't possibly stop it from doing. But at the same time, I'm continuously letting go of the helium balloons of all these thoughts and this analysis and just being there with folk. And when I can actually do that, when I can sufficiently get past my own fears and desires to actually be there with people, the transformation that happens right in front of my eyes is wondrous. I've seen really feisty litigators stop in mid harangue on some point where they're explaining how right they are and how wrong it is to be challenging them, uh, and just stop and go reflective and say, well, yeah, I guess we've talked about that, haven't we already? What do you think we should do next? I'm not exaggerating that. So that's really what I was really looking forward to chatting with you folk about most today. That because I think now that's what Sensei, one of the things he was trying to teach us, that the techniques and all of the analysis and all of the skills that we might be practicing and training in terms of understanding bodies and how to respond to an attack, that's like the dust in the wind that you see manifest when you enter into a conflict in a state of I, and then you open up to key, and then techniques will manifest and throws will manifest after that. That's what seems to be going on in mediation as well.
Oh,
That makes perfect sense.
Oh, I'm so glad it does because even as I say it, it sounds so amorphous.
No,
But
so there has to be a sense of connection. There has to be that sort of empty mind state of no, I'm going to do Ikkyo type moment. You
yes,
have to connect with your partner, know where their mind is at, and just as in a technique, if you're really doing it well, you're not thinking I'm going to do this. It just ends up where it ends up, but
yes,
you're
yes.
safe and the partner's safe. So I think that's very similar to what you're doing. You're not trying to take sides. You're just following the energy and showing them where the natural conclusion of that is.
Quentin, it's not just very similar to, it is exactly what I'm doing. It looks
Wow,
different.
then we're getting somewhere. This is what we wanted from this.
It looks different because we're wearing suits and we're not actually usually not touching each other very much. But it's exactly the same.
Mm.
And again, that's what gives me hope because there is no dearth of conflict out there. Um, and if it is not the case that there is some underlying physics that enables the resolution of conflict that is agnostic to context, that can be disseminated and replicated, then we're pretty well and truly screwed. And so my optimism kind of demands what my experience has informed me, which is that there is a continuity between what we've learned, what we practice, what we teach in Aikido, and how we can go out into the world and help make it a little less contentious.
Sounds good to me. So I'm delighted because I'm seeing clear parallels between the way you're doing your work and how to operate on the mat to do Aikido in the way I want to do Aikido anyway. Is there something else that you would like to tell us that you think hasn't come out so far? I mean, we've talked about physics, but do you want to expand on that a little bit more? Or are you happy?
I would like to. I wish that I understood it better and I could articulate it better because it comes out when I listen to myself try to explain the nexus, it comes out sounding not very tangible. But I'll have a go at it, and I would love you folk to tell me back better what I'm trying to say. So Physics 101, we know Newton's second law informs us that every action is going to elicit an equal and opposite reaction. So if I were to take if I had a resilient floor underneath me and a fairly bouncy ball of some kind, and I let it go, it's going to hit the floor and come back to me. And that is simply manifesting Newton's second law. And every time, unless I've left the planet, every time I let the ball go, it's going to replicate that experience because it's physics. And the other side of the coin is that once it's taken all the trouble to come back up to my hand and I open my hand again, it's going to go back to Earth. And that's manifesting gravity. And when you pause and you think about it, it's kind of wondrous that we've crafted a reality in which to spend our brief and precious lives, in which everything we do, and mind you, Newton didn't qualify his second law by saying, well, only every ill-intentioned or poorly executed action is going to elicit reactivity. Every action that we do, even well-intended as we try to muddle our way through disputes in our personal life or, professionally out in the world, is going to elicit some degree of reactivity. And at the same time, as gravity demonstrates to us, every particle of matter in the universe is yearning to reconnect with every other particle of matter in the universe. We happen to experience that when we're standing on a rather large sphere as a pull toward the center of the planet. But really what it is literally every particle of us is being drawn to reconnect with every other particle that is not obviously us. So that interplay, that frisson, that tension, as I understand it, it's not just some cosmic joke. The apparent paradox there, that we've created a reality in which we're presented with this rather frightening illusion of separation. Everything else is not us. And that, of course, Buddhism 101 elicits fear and desire, and then we spin the karmic wheel and it just keeps going. And at the same time, every particle of us is yearning to reconnect with every other particle of us. And the path that O-sensei saw was that if you can loosen your grip on separation, if you can step into into harmony, into non-separation, then it's the antidote or the counterbalance to reactivity. So reactivity isn't the demon, even though it births this continuous stream of conflicts. Rather, it's like our Zen teacher. Reactivity is what enables us to walk to create, to make art. It births all of the beauty and the fascination of life. And at the same time, if we are blind to the other side of the coin, um, if we are not introduced to the concept of I, then we can just go ping-ponging our way through life. Sophisticated parties can pour years and millions and tens of millions of dollars into fights because they can't see the path to resolution of these conflicts. It's such a lovely paradox. And now I hope you can see why I said that I so hope that someone else can say that in a more coherent and cogent way than I just did. Because
That
I
was
know
pretty
too.
coherent.
Oh, thank you, because you must be listening with the skill that I don't.
Chris, what did you say?
I said that was pretty coherent as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that I suppose when you're in a mediation, Tony, you've got two parties. They must want a connection of some sort because otherwise they wouldn't be there.
Hmm?
And you're acting as the neutral bridge that brings them together. You are that magnet that draws both in because of your open energy, your desire to harmonize, not to control, but just to harmonize, that brings them closer together.
I will, with your permission, attempt a redo of my description of the mediation process and try to respond to your thought in the course of that. So again, we start out with the joint session. Party A makes a presentation, could be 10 minutes, could be an hour, it could be longer than that. I then summarize it back. And one might ask, why do that? Because A, you're taking up time, you've only got a day. B, these are sophisticated parties. Often they've been in court hammering at each other for quite some time. You would think by now they must know each other's positions. And C, why start off on the wrong foot? Because party B, listening to party A say how right they are, is likely to be getting their backs up even further. And that's enough of a problem when they walked in the door. Why exacerbate it by starting off that way? And the reason we nonetheless start off that way is twofold. One, when we go into caucus, I have to give these rational actors an experiential basis for according some weight to the feedback I'm going to give them on their risk profile if they continue through in litigation. So I need to demonstrate that I've put in the time to actually have assimilated all of the factual and legal issues that are relevant before that day. And one cannot summarize back an hour-long presentation in 5 minutes, get all of the critical points right, not put any kind of a spin on it, unless one has previously put in the time and the effort to actually assimilate all of the information. So it is reassuring party A that once we go into caucus, they have some reason to give weight to my feedback on what their risks are. Conversely, for party B, although you would reasonably assume that they've heard it all before, and while they may vehemently disagree with it, that they at least understand what the critical points are in the perspective of the other side. But I can tell you that's simply not true. Our litigation system is so fraught with reactivity that even experienced people who are showing up trying to sufficiently understand what the other side is thinking that they can find a path to reach an agreement, even then, often the first time that a critical decision maker on party B's side has really heard and understood party A's position is in the joint session of the mediation, and they don't hear it and understand it when party A is making its presentation. Ironically, paradoxically, it's when I'm summarizing it back because while party A was making the presentation, party B was in such a state of heightened reactivity. Oh, that's bullshit. Or he's overstating that it wasn't coming in, it wasn't landing. But when I was summarizing it back, the person who they've now spent quite a bit of resources and trouble to spend a day with, they're listening with rapt attention to what I've taken away from Party A's presentation. So ironically, that's often the first time they've really understood
Oh.
Yeah,
where the other side is coming from. Isn't that amazing?
it is
Does
amazing.
in fact the legal sorry, does in fact the legal system push them to positioning for the poker game instead of helping them see possibility?
Yes, and it's the legal system writ broad, and there was from day one in law school. I assume it's still this way. I haven't been in law school for a while. You're trained to learn your skills as an advocate, whether you're going to be in what is called transactional law, putting deals together, or in litigation. You're trained to take your client's position and argue it as forcefully as possible. And
Amplify.
I won't bore you with digression into the Hegelian logic of that's built into our litigation system of thesis, antithesis, synthesis somehow being a productive process. But you're inculcated with that from day one of law school. You emerge as a fledgling lawyer, and immediately your worth is measured by how well you advocate, and your clients are already primed because they're the ones who are at the most direct effect of the given conflict to be in a reactive state. So you take, and we're all genetically programmed to fight or flee. So voila, it's the perfect storm. You have genetically predisposed creatures who are in a conflict, which tends to elicit a high degree of reactivity, put into a legal system that's predicated on a Hegelian dialectic, which exacerbates reactivity. And it is, in that sense, no surprise that disputes can roll on for years at tremendous cost and dysfunctionality and collateral damage, even when people are really intending to try to find a resolution to it.
Tony, I'm reminded of something I learned on a neuro-linguistic programming course I went on once, and I then took it onto the mat. And they were talking about disputes. And what they made you do is they said, well, find something that you really got upset about, that where you're having an argument with somebody else. And they would say, right, put yourself in your position and what were you thinking and what was going on with you? And then you had to move around the room and put yourself in the position of the person who was receiving this argument. And you had to say, well, what do you think they were thinking? And what was going on with them? And then you had to put yourself in the third position as a neutral observer and say, well, what did you think of this dispute that was going on? And I think you're like that observer who's saying, this is crazy. Clearly they can see that that's bonkers on both sides. There must be here's the solution. And I think that's kind of where this is at. You're not the reactive one. You're the flux that creates a welding process.
Oh,
I hear a disembodied voice. I don't have a
can you
visual.
see me?
That's Jamie.
Yes, yeah. Hey, Jamie.
Hello, Tony and Christian and Steven and Tim and Chris, Quentin. It's great to see everybody. Some of you guys haven't seen for a while. Wonderful to see you, Tony. Yeah, I'm just sitting here listening with my psychologist ears. And, a lot of work that I've been doing around trauma, conflict, basically, you mentioned fight and flight. And I think we really have to look at what happens to the nervous system and where people are at. When we're in our triggered sympathetic nervous system compared to our parasympathetic, calm, equilibrium, Ike, part of ourselves, there's a really big difference in our ability to think clearly and to have a higher emotional intelligence and to be able to hear, to be able to communicate better. I mean, it's just, I've certainly found this doing dialogue and, for example, the Middle East. I mean, it's just so volatile, right? Like what you deal with. It's like, it's just so fast. And, I've helped facilitate dialogue groups and put some somatic aikido in there, just basics, center, ground, breathe, you find some alignment, all that kind of stuff. And sometimes we have to stop, almost every 10 seconds, certainly every couple minutes, because so that we can, again, start to hear each other, so that we can get to, I work with a compassionate listening project, so that we can actually start to hear the other and understand and get somewhere. Otherwise, when people are just triggered, it's impossible. And so it seems like your presence as that neutral figure and who's taking into consideration and is well prepared. And I have some idea of how you prepare from, doing some shadow work with you before. It's incredible how you prepare, and what so that they have trust in you. But I think it's that de-escalation of the nervous system, and we don't talk about it that much. But that's what's really, I think, critical to being able to get somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. What you said.
Let me just ask, is there anybody who's got any questions you'd like to ask Tony?
Got one. Hey,
Stephen.
Tony, you remember me?
I do. How are you, sir?
Hey, man. It's been a long, long time. Thank you, Quentin, for putting this together. It's a delight to be able to have this connection. It's just wonderful. I have so many questions, sir. I feel like I could ask forever. The one that's most interesting is that if we stick with the metaphor that your presence is like that bridge, right? And my curiosity is that prior to the meeting in person, there has to be a desire to go towards that bridge.
Hmm.
And the world that you're inhabiting is filled with this mixed message of I can win, I'm the best litigator out here, I'm going to destroy you in court. And there's some other little voice that's like, oh God, I'm not ready, right?
Yeah, we may be flattering humanity by attributing to all of us that we also have that little voice. Um, I'm not sure or in other words, that's a perfectly reasonable assumption, but I'm not sure what it is that brings people to my door. Sometimes the client may be exhausted by the legal fees, by the disruption that the ongoing litigation is causing their business. Um, Sometimes it may be that a court that they're before has told them, look, I want you to go and at least try. I'm not sure what the motivation is, but you're quite right that something takes them to my door despite their certitude of how right they are in the dispute.
That was partly my question was that if my memory is correct, most of your stuff's all confidential. So there, like it's kind of like how would they know they want to go towards that bridge when there isn't any billboards? There isn't in the classic sense, right? You're not like horrifically cheesily advertising. Yet there's still this draw, and I was just really curious about how you make sense of that.
So this is why I've been looking forward to this day. That's a lovely question that I really haven't spent much time thinking about. As you bring it up, well, there are, I'm sure, quite a lot of disputes that don't make it to my or any other mediator's door in the first instance. And there's such a plethora of disputes out there that to some extent we could answer your question just by saying that somehow some stumble into the doorway.
But
As compared to having
when
any
I
unifying
when
characteristic
I
that
was there,
takes them
Tony,
there.
that wasn't an accident. When I shadowed you, that was not an accident, and it was millions of dollars at play. So I love that answer, but it feels like there's so much more to it.
Yeah,
My suggest
undoubtedly there is. I'm simply confessing that it's such a lovely question that I had given inadequate thought to before today. So I'm kind of looking back to you now for some insight on that one.
Well, I'm going to suggest that in the majority of cases, they've exhausted every other possible way of resolving it. They haven't found a resolution, so you're the last gasp saloon.
Well,
Quentin,
again, I'm sorry.
I just
Take the shot.
well, I just want to add one piece, Quentin. There's a saturation that isn't being acknowledged. That there's so many other people who want to be Tony. There's a lot, and so it's not like Tony's the only guy.
Sure.
He's definitely very. It's just there's a lot of other places that they could go. So my apologies.
And Quentin, what I was going to add was that now, let me let that gestate just a bit so you don't get it quite as half-baked.
All right, well, I'll let you sit on that. Is anybody else got a question you would like to ask Tony?
Tony, I'd be interested to know, as you know, Moon and I worked in Cyprus with the Harvard negotiation project and the Fisher and Urey's approach. And one of the things that I thought was so powerful about their work was the initial phase, which was to acknowledge the charge in the situation before you enter the negotiation. Otherwise, the negotiation gets colored by everybody trying to get their charge acknowledged, their emotional charge. And I'm wondering if to some degree you attend to that, and if so, how?
The honest answer, poorly. How do I attend to it? Not sufficiently frequently and poorly. In other words, people get short shrift in my process. I probably maybe I'm being too introspective now, but I probably rationalize my natural lack of skills in terms of observing, being conscious of, and accommodating people's needs in that regard. I probably rationalize that by thinking, but we've only got a day, so I can't really tarry that long to administer
Probably
that need.
a reality.
But yeah, but it's probably also a rationalization. So what ends up happening is, on a good day, I substitute for that by stepping into a place of complete openness with people within which they can feel that degree of acknowledgement
Mhm.
and safety
Oh,
as
That's
a
funny.
function, as a function of AI, rather than as a function of I, capital letter I.
oh, in a certain sense, you're saying it happens implicitly, it happens energetically, and it
Yes.
doesn't require that I take 2 hours out before we go for everybody to tell us how upset they are.
Yes, and undoubtedly, if I had more skill in that area, I could take something less than 2 hours and more directly accommodate and address that and acknowledge it. But I guess it's not my skill. That's probably is falling more in Jamie's, skill set than in mine.
Tony, you told me
Well, I
when we
think could I just maybe just shape the question a tiny bit differently, which would be something different about you from other mediators is your Aikido background and your Aikido sensibilities. So maybe the question has something to do with, how much does that, do you think, informs and affects your effectiveness? Would that help, Stephen? Is it something like that?
Can I just come step in there? Because in my prep for this interview, Tony said that when he walks into a room, he is completely open. And very, very open in his energy and his presence. And I think it's that presence that no people are feeling any edge. And that is a calming effect. And I think that's very much down to your Aikido. But Tony, you come in here.
If I said that every time I walk in a room, I'm completely open, oh gosh, I was flattering myself or flat out lying. But I think what I was probably striving to say, which I think captures the sense of what you're reflecting, is that to the degree that I am being effective, however infrequently, I'm somehow mustering up the courage in the midst of all of my own stuff and all the stuff that's flying around the room to let go for a moment at least. And fortunately, that will usually suffice. Even when I'm doing a very poor job of doing that, even a little bit of it is magical.
That's fine. Those words sound similar to me, but that's good. Um, Guys, we've been going a while now, and I feel it's been incredibly productive. So I'm going to give you, Tony, the last word on what you would like to add, if anything. Because I think you've done a great job of explaining what you do, and our interpretation has seen where the juxtaposition is between Aikido and mediation.
I accept that as a cue that we need to wrap, but rather than hear me talk more, I would love to hear from any or all of you what you've taken away from this, because I maybe if the universe gives me another 47 years, I'll be able to touch enough of the fights that are going on out there to make a difference. But I don't think so. And you guys have all been out there touching it from the same place in different ways. And what I was looking forward to today was, seeing where we all are in that process and what we can learn from each other as we continue in it. And I'd love to hear from you folk in whatever time we have left, Quentin.
Okay, well,
What
let's
you
work our
take
way around
away.
the room then. Let Tim, do you want to start? What have you taken from today?
Well, I've taken from today that as a recent law school grad, that maybe my Aikido background would actually lead a path to mediation based on Aikido principles. I've given it thought. I took a class in mediation. I did very well. I actually kind of blew most of my classmates away. Like we did a lot of role playing, and in some of the role playing, we had people really going at it, and I managed to diffuse them. And when we were done, they were like, "Wait a minute, I was supposed to be angry. Why am I not?" And but I didn't see a path to how to actually make it happen. And so I see that you've made it happen, and maybe I should give it more consideration.
Fantastic. Christian, would you like to chip in? You have to unmute though.
Yeah,
It's always the secret.
mediation is quite unknown domain for me, so I was listening with rigorous interest. I was touched by your, I would say, authenticity. Maybe not the wrong word, but I think that's what I feel.
Thank you so much. That means the
Stephen,
world.
when you're ready. Stephen,
Hey,
what did you take from today?
I just didn't want to cut off Tony. Did you want to add anything else there, big guy?
only the depth of my appreciation for what Christian just said. Thank you.
Yeah. I just I've missed you, man. I can't believe it's been almost 15 years. And can can I give you a call sometime? Is your number still the same?
808-283-1863.
Yeah, I think it's the same one as there. Yeah, I would love to like to reciprocate your request about like how I've made sense of things and that more because what I felt like you were asking for in the end was like, hey, how are you all? How is the rest of you understanding that? And that could be a wonderful follow on to this, Quentin. Is that kind of conversation because I feel like it's so interesting for me about we can have that presence and there's times where it may not get their attention. And so it made me curious around things like how you do your summarization as a means of, as sort of like Chris was asking about that co-regulation. People come in with a charge, right? They feel heard. That helps lower the charge. Your tone, how you say things, the way it's said, the acuteness of the analysis. Like to me, those are all the beginnings of this metabolism or harmonizing. And so I just left with way more questions. So thank
Well,
you.
may I toss out a thought? I don't want to tax Quentin's time or patience, but if you folk thought it was worthwhile to do some kind of a joint seminar for the broader Aiki community, where you folk are now, we're kind of a panel, taking this discussion, letting it gestate a bit, and then together, kind of disseminating what we've distilled from that to the broader Aiki community. I'm in for that, just and Stephen individually, just text me sometime and say, Tone, I've let this, sit and percolate and I'd love to chat for a bit. Okay.
Well, anybody can
Mikey,
come
thank
back to
you.
me. Anyone can come back to me after this with their thoughts on that, or send them via Tony. It's fine. But three of us from the board of Aiki Extensions are here, so I'm sure we'll talk about that and see how we can take it forward. Because
I would love that. And in terms of my time, I have the undeserved blessing that when I'm mediating, it's pretty intense, but when I'm not mediating, I'm bum. I'm amateur woodworking or, working on the land or something else. So if you guys want to devote the time to do some iteration of taking this forward, I'm in.
okay, Jamie, final thoughts?
Yeah, I've missed you too, Tony. It's great to see you. And your humility is always amazing. um, so yeah, I mean, I would love to consider some kind of collaboration somehow, some kind of next thing we could do. And Tim, when you spoke right away, I was already having this thought, which is I've been working on a lot of like legacy lately, in some different situations, as we're all getting a little bit older. And one thing I was thinking is how amazing it would be for you to perhaps have a small group, maybe 4, 6, I don't know, call it something like that. People like Tim, lawyers, or maybe more recent grads or lawyers, they've been at it a long time, doesn't matter. But and to actually have a training group, something like that, to transition more and build up more of a core of mediators with an Aikido or Aiki basis. And Tim, I loved what you said, and I think that there's something kind of I can feel a certain similarity or resonance, I guess, of kind of your energetics with Tony. And I can imagine that you being you and staying kind of calm and with all of your Aikido training, and people going, what happened? How come we we weren't like fighting? And I think that would be just a tremendous, tremendous contribution. And I can't think of anybody better to kind of lead that. And if we had more prosecutorial lawyers, many of whom aren't even that happy, just being such attack dogs, and some who do make a shift to mediation. Actually, I have a good friend. He's a golf student his whole business is mediation. He moved to that 20 something years ago in San Diego, but he's not an Aikido guy. But anyways, I think that if we could like start to shift law and prosecutions and all this conflicts to an Aiki model into what you do, and to train more lawyers that way, and even Aikido or Aiki based lawyers, that would be a tremendous contribution.
Thank you,
Well,
Jamie.
Quentin, have we exhausted your time at this point?
I am getting very close. I have to dash off elsewhere very shortly. Yeah, but don't worry. I want to give Chris a chance to have a quick day on what he got from today.
Well, two things. One, the deep sense of parallel discovery in the length of engagement that we've had out in the world from this Aiki awareness and the parallel effects that it's having in different environments is quite striking to me. And my other response was very much along the lines that others have spoken in, and that is I see that there's been a real evolution of expertise in the world based in our Aikido training, and that we're all 60 and 70 and 80. And my whole agenda these days is handoff, and I really appreciated the reference to that possibility of how do we hand off what we've caught, especially with the issues that we face in the dojo world of young people not being as engaged in Aikido as we were at that age. There's something about how can we help the younger folks realize the practicality of application of Aikido beyond the mat. And so I hold that as part of the accountability that I have. So I'm just interested in exploring that. Tony, I'd love to catch up with you, which I will reach out to do, just in regards to these parallels, what you've discovered and what we seem to be discovering as well. Seems like the same awareness manifesting in quite remarkable ways.
Thank you, Chris.
I would look forward to hearing anything back from you folks, including from the board, in terms of whether within IKEA extensions, there's something more that we can offer in furtherance of Chris's thought of just helping to expand people's perception of the practical applications of what we're training on the mat in terms of our lives and the rest of the world. Okay, I'm going to stop blathering. Quentin,
Well,
thank you.
I just wanted to jump in. I don't know if you noticed, but there was a guy that was attending, Jim Malamed. I don't know if he introduced himself, but he has a really big platform for people who do conflict resolution work. He runs mediate.com, and I'm a friend of his. So if there's an interest in putting it together, depending on how it's framed, I'm sure Jim would be interested in possibly co-sponsoring or allowing a platform. You get more visibility, more names, et cetera, et cetera. I just wanted to name that since I didn't realize how many board members are here, but that often can be a really nice dovetail.
Yeah, sounds great.
Lovely. Thank you
just,
all.
Just follow up this meeting and send an email suggesting the name of the bloke, and we'll see what we do. Tony, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
I hope it was fun for you as it was for us.
This has been a joy. Thank you so much. Take care.
All right. Cheers,
Domo
everybody.
arigato. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Quentin,
Bye.
Tony.
Thanks, Quentin.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you,
Thanks,
Zane. See y'all.